spokesmodel for the theater. I'd like to welcome you to the last showing of This Is Cinerama in Dayton, Ohio. I know a lot of you have come from all over the country. We really appreciate everything you've gone through to be here. I know we've got members of the press here today. We've got people from out of state, out of country, people who drove for days, people who spent hundreds of dollars to fly in to watch a movie in John Harvey's other living room, as we like to call it. Before the show starts, if you've never seen the movie before, I do a little bit of a slideshow presentation to kind of explain what is Cinerama, because a lot of people aren't that familiar with it. When you went to see it back in the 50s, it would be kind of overwhelming and people wouldn't understand how it works. So we put together this little slideshow because a lot of people kept asking the same questions, and we figured, well, let's tell them the history behind Fred Waller's invention. Well, movies were invented in the late 1800s. I don't think there's anybody here who was there when that happened, but a lot of people probably remember what the movies were like. Just after World War II, television was coming out and proving a lot of competition for movies. If you went into a modern motion picture theater, the screens were basically square. They were 1/3 wider than they were tall. This was the standard literally around the world. Fred Waller, who was a specialist that worked for Paramount Studios with lenses and special effects, kept thinking, why can't people see movies the way they see the real world? See the whole picture, kind of a you are there process. Well, after he introduced Cinerama in New York in 1952, and that's what this book would tell us, if we could see it in focus, it says that basically the widescreen revolution commenced September 30th, 1952 in New York, when Lowell Thomas and Fred Waller introduced This Is Cinerama to a waiting public. It was influenced by a silent film. It's amazing to me as I study old movies. I work now for the Library of Congress and the Motion Picture Conservation Center here in Dayton out at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, that so many movies today are influenced by the thousands that came before them. Abel Gance, who directed Napoleon in France in 1927, wanted to give people a real feel for the epic size of a European war. It was actually a World War kind of action. And what he did was he used 3 cameras to photograph 3 different points of view and 3 projectors to put them up on the screen simultaneously. That way the audience could watch Napoleon looking over the troops, watching them rush down from the hill and meet in the valley simultaneously. And there were several segments in the film where the panels synced up side by side so you could see the action happening at the same time. A scientist at the time, back in the 20s, who saw this screening, went and developed the anamorphic lens process that would later become CinemaScope, simply by seeing this process. A lot of people wonder what's the difference between regular film, which is usually 35 millimeter film, and 70 millimeter. Does that mean because 35 goes into 70 twice, that 70 millimeter is twice as good? Not true. If you were to take a frame of 35 millimeter film and mask it out the way they do today to show a 1.85 picture, cut that little picture out and lay it sideways into a frame of 70, you could fit 4 frames of 35 into a 70. What that means is if you photograph it in 70 millimeter, you're going to get 4 times as much focus. And if you show it in 70 millimeter after being photographed that way, you don't get 8, you get 16 times sharper focus. Cinerama is twice as big as 70 millimeter film. You can get upwards of 30 times sharper focus. This is a picture of Fred Waller, our hero. Fred Waller. Fred Waller. Fred Waller. I love Fred Waller's geeky bow tie. It showed you he concentrated on movies, not fashion. Fred Waller worked from 1939 at the World's Fair in New York, where he developed Vitorama for an architect who wanted to give people the feeling of being inside of a building, what it would look like. He used 11 cameras, if you want to count them, 11 16 millimeter cameras that had to be linked up by a chain drive, basically a bicycle chain drive, to 16 projectors that would fill a screen 180 degrees around the curve, horizontal, and then a 90-degree curve vertical. This has also been copied by OmniMax and a lot of other processes trying to imitate what Fred was already doing in 1939. He was approached by the United States government to develop a 5-projector system. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 projectors projecting onto the same shape screen airplanes in a dogfight. And these gentlemen down here are training, this is a gunnery trainer, to shoot down the moving targets. Right as World War II was at its peak, there were dozens of these set up around the world for pilots to train, and the United States government actually awarded Fred Waller a medal for saving, they estimate, thousands of lives because of his realistic flight simulator helped train men here on the ground where it was safe. It's a picture of Lowell Thomas, famous radio commentator, also commentated on newsreels. He was a traveler. He only wrote 56 books, I believe. He was published in hundreds of newspapers. He was a friend of both Fred Waller's and Hazard Reeves. They approached him in the 40s to ask him if he could help get involved. Cinerama had at one time as partners no less than Time Magazine, the Rockefeller family, and Louis B. Mayer, who had been kicked out of MGM. All for a while were connected with Cinerama, but it was really when Lowell Thomas came on board that they were able to get something to show to the public. This is camera number 1. All of the movie that you'll be watching today was filmed with this one camera. Basically, it's 3 cameras at angles all bolted together inside of a soundproof box. The camera without film would weigh 150 pounds, with film weigh 200 pounds. Inside this plywood, fiberglass, lead sheeting to soundproof the whole thing would weigh 850 pounds. Oh, and I think in the previous shot, you can see these Telefunken microphones, which were just the best of their day. John Harvey tells me that if you can find one of these microphones today, they still sell for $1,200 like they did back in the 50s. They still pick up an incredible 4,000? Pardon me, inflation. Yeah, it's just amazing. The quality of those microphones is still amazing, the bandwidth of sound that they can pick up. This is a diagram from the Technicolor book that explains how one strip of film would go through the camera. In the lab, they could separate it into the red, the green, and the blue to separate the light, adjust the Technicolor any way you wanted to, and then put in the release print the beautiful Technicolor. You're going to be seeing a Technicolor print today that is just gorgeous. Even though it's over 30 years old and a little scratched and dirty, the color is quite amazing. Here's a picture of one of the Cinerama theaters around the world. This one is from Italy. As Cinerama would grow during its short 10-year lifetime, it would be put into over 260 theaters around the world. There were Cinerama theaters in Rome, in Italy, in Cairo, in Moscow. There were more Cinerama theaters in Germany than there were in, I would say, just like any other country except for the United States. The United States had over 90 at one time. They're all gone. You're sitting in the only existing one right now. In Seattle, Washington, there's another one that will play Cinerama. You might want to get your pencils out on June 7th. That's it. One-time shot. The print you'll be watching today will play again in Seattle on June 7th. Then John plays How the West Was Won. The print we're playing next week once, and he takes the prints home, and all this equipment goes back home with him. He's going to set it back up in his living room so he can run it when he wants to for friends, and he's going to be looking for probably an angel, someone who wants to either pay to build a theater from the ground to play Cinerama, or, and I love his ambition, put it all on wheels. He's got a brilliant idea about maybe taking all this equipment and a portable screen to different cities around the world for like a month at a time. In Omaha, Nebraska, there still is a Cinerama theater, a curved Martin Cinerama theater that still has their curved screen. They don't have the projectors of the film, but if we can work out a deal, John might take it on the road. So keep your fingers crossed. How is the screen made? People wonder why it's such a big curve. Well, it's real simple. Fred Waller experimented, can you hold your hand up? Right. This young lady is dead center of the auditorium, wearing that lovely Cinerama t-shirt. Everything is geared towards her. She's in what they call the fulcrum. If you were to take a string from the edge of her nose and measure over to the side of the screen over here, it's the same distance from the right side of the screen to the center to the left. The idea is the back of her eyeball is curved, and the way the lens processes information, if it's in focus at 40 feet away, to the right and the left 40 feet away is also in focus. So she's going to get this hyper-reality kind of situation where during the film, her mind will not tell her she's watching a two-dimensional picture. It will feel like she's part of the action. I know she's been here before, so you've had that before, and that's why you're sitting right there in the center.
4 times before.
4 times. Practice makes perfect. Thanks for coming back. The screen, when Fred developed it, it was great. Every time he came up with a neat idea, let's do this, let's do a curved screen, it also created problems. One of those problems was when light comes from one of the side projectors, that's Able projector over there in the corner. When Able sends its light over to the A panel of the screen and light just naturally would bounce off this white surface, some of the light would bounce off and hit actually that side of the screen over there, washing out the image. So Fred came up with this neat idea. How about take regular screen material, cut it into narrow ribbons. These ribbons are 3/4 of an inch wide. Intentionally stack them one edge over the other. It only causes like a 7-degree bend. And he takes that light that would bounce straight back towards the projector and now bends it to aim it at the audience. You get more light back, more color, more focus, more you are there. The screen is made up of over 980 ribbons. I can't touch them, but I want to show you just how delicately it's all strung together. I can move it with my breath. The screen is hung from a curtain rack that John actually took out of a Cinerama theater, the Daybell Theater here in Dayton, Ohio, and he saved it for, I guess, 20 years, waiting to find some other place to put it. The ribbons came from the museum in England, where he helped put up a Cinerama theater there back in '93. They donated the ribbons to him, thinking that he would cut them down to put them into his living room. He said, "Cut them? No way. I'll save them until a theater lets me put them in." This diagram shows how the Cinerama picture elements have to be in perfect sync, side by side with the sound. Today's film has over 12 miles sequence frame by frame throughout the entire running of the film. If one of the projectors were to jump off sprocket and a frame were to go out of sequence, everybody in the audience would know it because there'd be a flash each time the scene changed. This is a synchronizer that John uses to synchronize the 4 pieces of film as they go through this piece of equipment to make sure everything stays in sequence. The print you'll be watching today is put together out of, we estimate, 20 different prints, the best existing material. As it would play in a theater and get damaged, they would send extra reels to the theater to splice in to make it all match, because if it doesn't match exactly, they have to put in what's called a slug, either a black segment of film, and I think in today's print during the Spanish dancer sequence, you'll see the right panel of the screen right at the end of that scene go black for about 3 or 4 seconds, simply because that piece of film could not pass safely through the equipment, and John put in a piece of filler film. It's either that or cut into the 2 healthy prints to remove that segment. This is a picture again of Fred Waller, our hero, with the Cinerama camera. Notice how tiny it really is, even though it could weigh 850 pounds. And there, that little butterfly section is the open space, the shutter for where the lenses would be. He discovered by using small lenses, they're actually 27mm lenses, about the size of a contact lens. He figured the closer we match how the eye works, the more realistic the detail. These tiny little lenses work just like when you squint, you can see deeper range of focus. Well, these lenses, John was telling me he was interviewing John Priestley, one of the cameramen in Los Angeles about 15 years ago. He said that once they set it in focus, it would be in focus for anything from 18 inches in front of the camera to infinity. Or as he said at the time, to New York, but he was sitting in California when he said it. Here's the portable Cinerama camera. Can you imagine taking that on vacation? This is Hazard Buzz Reeves. His nickname was Buzz because he always liked to get the buzz out of recorded sound. He was the best sound engineer in the world at the time at his own studios in New York and worked for somebody by the name of Bing Crosby. You ever hear about Bing? Bing was bigger than Elvis. And he developed this multi-channel recording because he figured, let's make the sound like it's coming from wherever it was recorded from, the left, the right, the center, the back. And he was the man that came up with that. And this unique piece of equipment, this portable sound recorder, was used to record all of the film on location for today's movie, and it's now sitting in our lobby. So if you want to see a real piece of cinema history, it's just out in the lobby.